We are here with the conclusion of Justice League versus Godzilla and Kong after a huge delay. And this is gonna have this crazy moment. I'm excited to see how you guys react to it. So what this does is this picks up about 10 minutes before the ending of the previous video that we did with the return of Superman. Because if you guys recall, at the very beginning of this story, Godzilla and Superman fought one another. And Godzilla helped Superman to understand his place in the bigger picture. And so Superman was basically down for the count. He was taken out like that. It was kind of nuts, right? It was mind-blowing. You guys were flipping out in the comments section, like, how in the world does Superman lose to Godzilla? Well, he lost the way that he lost in the comic. That's how he loses to Godzilla. So what he does is he explains everything to Lois in terms of how he's back, because the initial intention here of like Batman and iPhone, that's the name we use for Cyborg in DC Comics, he's a walk and talking iPhone, that what they had done is they had put him in a kind of healing matrix, not the kind they use after the death of Superman as a massive plot device to bring his character back, but the reality is that it just wasn't enough. And so what Batman and Cyborg did is they used the device to create a kind of boom tube to teleport Superman to the sun. And of course, as we know, Superman, basically healing by solar radiation, ended up healing rapidly because of the sun. And so in this moment, one of the cool things you get here is he finally gets to ask Lois to marry him, which is what he was in the process of doing when Godzilla and King Kong attacked. Now again, for those of you guys who are catching up, we'll talk about how they arrived here in the first place, but there is a playlist that I'll link to at the end of this video that has all the videos we've done up to this point, in case you're kind of jumping in for the very first time. But the important thing is that once he asks Lois to marry him, he basically bails out, right? He goes to deal with all the stuff because Lois is like, you need to go be Superman. There'll be time for touching naughty bits later on. And so what you do is you switch over to Deathstroke and Cheetah, one of like the 3 or 4 times she's ever been relevant in the history of DC Comics. And they're actually on the hunt for Toyman. Now this is when we get into kind of an explanation, a little bit of exposition in terms of how all this happened. That what ended up taking place in the first issue of the comic is Lex Luthor and the Legion of Doom had basically got a hold of what was called the dreamstone. And the dreamstone is literally this rock that allows you to turn dreams into reality or to pull things in from other dimensions. In this instance, they were yanked over to the dimension of Godzilla and King Kong and then brought them alongside all the other Titans over into the main DC universe. The crazy thing about this is that everybody has been on the hunt for Toyman this entire time. And what we end up finding out is he's been dead this whole time. As soon as Godzilla showed up, he stepped on the guy and he killed him. So the question now is, where's the Dreamstone? Because seemingly it's the only way to send Godzilla and Kong and all the other Titans back to where they came from. Speaking of which, we jump over with like Kong and Mechagodzilla, because that was part of the plan of Lex Luthor, and really it seemed to be the conclusion of his plan, essentially using the plans of Mechagodzilla to create his own kind of Jaeger, basically, right? Just a giant Mechagodzilla. And he was wreaking havoc, man. Dude, this guy was just wreaking havoc across Metropolis. But of course, this led to all the Titans converging into one location. Now, what you also have here is a giant mutated version of the Skullcrawler. I think it's called a Skullcrawler. For those of you guys who are just joining with us, whenever I don't know the names of these particular Titans, I just give them names. Like, one of them is named Steve. I don't remember which one, and it'll probably change over the course of this video. But I just give them arbitrary names because, honestly, I think it's more entertaining. But this Skullcrawler, if that's what it is, I don't remember the name, we're gonna call him Jason, right? This dude is just like wreaking havoc among all the other Titans that are here, right? Now, of course, it all kind of comes down to Kong, but don't really misunderstand what's happening. It's just kind of a free-for-all, right? Like, it's a battle royale. And that's really what's throwing the Justice League off by and large here, is because of the fact that there really is no order. There really isn't like a side to join in this particular instance. So they're trying to stave off as much destruction as they possibly can while trying to quell this fight as best they can. But they're dealing with forces that they don't fully comprehend. There's no real salient method of communication among these different Titans as far as the Justice League is concerned. So Batman in his giant anti-Godzilla Batman suit, which is amazing, right? This guy's just like punching dudes left and right as best he can, but he's largely facing off against Lex. The problem is that in the midst of all of this, Guy Gardner from the Green Lanterns is killed. And I gotta say, man, I'm a little disappointed because I feel like in recent years, Guy Gardner's just just kind of become the whipping boy for the Green Lanterns, right? Like, do we need a character to die in a story with the Green Lanterns? Time for Guy Gardner, right? We're going to send you the way of Black Bolt and the Inhumans, right? It kind of sucks. Now, one of the other cool things that goes on here is that Jessica Cruz, another Green Lantern, ends up waking up Beast Boy using smelling salts. And I didn't know that, like, they had those things on them. Those of you guys who are familiar with smelling salts, those are the things they use when you get your clock cleaned, right? When somebody just knocks you out just hardcore, the way Mike Tyson's gonna knock out Jake Paul. They use smelling salts to wake you up, so don't be surprised if you see them using those on Jake Paul, because that dude don't stand a chance. But what happens is when Beast Boy wakes up, it's actually one of the most beneficial characters they could have in their arsenal. But an important distinction to recognize here is that the ring of Guy Gardner leaves. Now, that's something that I want you to keep in the back of your head, because it comes back, right? And it's dope when it happens, right? It's dope, son. And so what you do is you switch over to King Kong, fighting against Jason. And it's not really anything that King Kong is unfamiliar with, right? I mean, those of you guys who have seen Skull Island and so on, you guys know that, like, he's well versed in facing off against these things. The only real variable here is Jason's size, right? How big this guy is. But in the midst of all of this, Beast Boy turns into effectively his own version of King Kong and joins in. And that's why I say Beast Boy is very, very powerful and very, very capable. There was, what is it, like Beast World or something like that, the story that came out recently in DC Comics. We haven't covered it because we haven't covered DC in so long, because honestly they haven't really released very many good stories. But that one really, like, shows how powerful Beast Boy is. Let me know down in the comments if you guys want me to cover it, because that dude is next level overpowered. In fact, I feel like he kills all the superheroes. But beyond that, it really just kind of comes down to the Justice League basically reining all these things in, right? These skull crawlers and whatnot, these variants of Jason, right? Just kind of reining all these things in as best they can and trying to bring some measure of order to the chaos. But the other part of this is Lex Luthor, right? That now some measure of order has been returned, that the main focus has to be the Mechagodzilla. And he gets dealt with pretty quickly. But one of the other things that you guys remember from the other videos that we covered is Shazam, right? This guy was captured by the Legion of Doom. Now, a lot of it was just him flying in reckless, because Superman being defeated by Godzilla in the first issue largely came by way of the fact that Shazam was more of a distraction than anything else. And in a moment when Superman was just not quite paying attention the way he should have, that's when Godzilla overpowered him. Now, Godzilla would have overpowered him anyway, but that's when it ended up happening. And so, of course, Superman races off to the Legion headquarters and then rescues Shazam. So what you have with him here, alongside Supergirl, Kara Zor-El, and Superman, you've got like three more or less Superman-esque characters who are on the battlefield, right? If this is a game of chess, we got three queens on the board, right? It's game over. And so, of course, Shazam does a little bit of apologizing and, hey man, I'm sorry that I essentially got you killed. My bad, bro. Superman's like, it's cool, man. And like, he races off to basically deal with one last thing. Now, for Lex Luthor and with Shazam showing up here on the scene, the tables turn incredibly fast, because now you have all these other Titans to contend with alongside Lex Luthor and his Mechagodzilla. Now, of course, the Green Lanterns show up here in their giant suits of armor, and they're basically able to kind of unify, not that different from like a Megazord, and in turn, like, they offer assistance to Batman. And it allows everybody else to just kind of get in there, deal with the Titans and so on and so forth, and not necessarily destroy them, but basically just kind of like defeat them as best they can. And they do a great job, right? Truth to tell, like, they do a great job of pulling this off. But even with King Kong and Jason, there's still this issue of Jason being that powerful and that strong and getting the upper hand on Kong. So what happens, ladies and gentlemen? I told you guys that lantern ring was gonna come back. And I told you it's gonna be this ridiculous moment, because this ring zooms past Jessica Cruz, like, what in the heck? And bonds itself to King Kong. King Kong becomes a Green Lantern, and it's dope, because the first thing this guy does is use a hard light construct in the form of like his battle axe. Now, one of the things to remember about Green Lanterns, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with them, technically they are the strongest beings in the universe. And to the question that those of you guys who are unfamiliar with DC Comics are going to ask, has there ever been an instance where Superman has been a lantern? The answer to that is yes, and in fact, there was a character who was a Daxamite, basically a Kryptonian who left Kryptonite and went to a planet called Daxam. I don't remember his name, but he was effectively every bit as strong as Superman and was also a Green Lantern. And he got wrecked by Superboy Prime in the Sinestro Corps War. I'm pretty sure it was the Sinestro Corps War. It was amazing, dude, it was so cool. Like, honestly, we should probably just link these playlists down in the description because there's so many of them that we're referencing here. But King Kong as a Green Lantern is cool, but Green Lanterns are all about imagination, right? It's why Kyle Rayner, the Green Lantern, creates these just crazy looking constructs, and Hal Jordan just creates like a giant boxing glove. Because Hal Jordan is really, really cool. He's awesome. He's not nearly as imaginative as somebody like Kyle Rayner. But King Kong is not the sharpest tool in the shed. Let's just call it for what it is, right? He's just a great big huge ape. So what he does is he conjures the things he knows. Now, would it be dope if King Kong like conjured an army of Kongs? Yes, that would be cool. It'd be horrifying for the Justice League, but it would be cool, right? But the fact is, like, that's why he's using this in a simplified form. And so all these roads start to converge into one another when you have Superman who travels to go see Godzilla. And that's where the last video that we had left off at, right? Superman just showing up and saying, we need to talk. Now, of course, Godzilla, for all the death and destruction that he causes, is a fairly primal creature, right? Like, he's pretty basic. He's not ultra smart or anything like that. And so Superman kind of recognizes this, right? And then just like starts attacking Godzilla, right? Just starts like fighting this guy and beating the crap out of him. The funny thing about this though is Superman is doing this because, one, by removing the chains that keep Godzilla there, right? Because he was originally trapped here by like Aquaman, Batman, you know, a few of these other characters. By unlocking those chains, of course, it allows Godzilla to move. And the goal is to get Godzilla to follow him so that Superman can lead Godzilla to the larger fight. Because as you guys know, Godzilla is king of the monsters, even though King Kong is better. And that Godzilla is the one that would basically bring this entire conflict to an end, or at least that would seem to be the case. Because once Superman arrives on the scene with Godzilla in tow, Godzilla takes one look around and it's just like, son, right? Like, I am in the business of whooping ass. And business is good because Godzilla immediately gets to work. Now, here's the thing. Batman deals with Lex Luthor immediately. And it's not just Batman. It's like Batman, Supergirl, Donna Troy, Wonder Woman, and Shazam. They basically rip the arms off of Mechagodzilla, which essentially makes it useless. Batman picks it up, breaks its back in this kind of ceremonial gesture reminiscent of Nightfall when Bane broke his back. And then, like, we get into the main meat and potatoes of what's going on here. There is this really dope moment, this amazing shot when Superman's like flying towards like us as the reader and like Godzilla's in the background. I kind of want to get like this whole thing like framed if I possibly could. I don't know how in the world I get it drawn for me, but it looks amazing because Godzilla shows up here and he's like, okay, look, King Kong, it's cool. You were dealing with Jason. Don't worry, home slice, I got this. Godzilla takes this dude out in one hit. Now, technically, it's Godzilla and Superman working together using atomic breath and heat vision, which I never knew I needed to see, and I'm so glad that I did. Godzilla and Superman teaming up, like, it's amazing. Of course, Kong jumps in and deals like the killing blow to this guy, but like all of them teaming up is phenomenal because once that's done, all the Titans effectively stand down, right? Like the Green Lantern ring ultimately leaves King Kong, which leaves me a little sad because honestly, I kind of want to read a solo comic book series or even just a mini series that follows the adventures of King Kong as a Green Lantern. Imagine King Kong out in space as like a Green Lantern. That would be amazing. But then we get this just kind of hilarious moment, right? Because the question that's asked by like Wonder Woman is, how do we solve all of this, right? Like, how do we deal with this? Because Toyman, we need to locate him and we have to find the dreamstone and all that stuff. Superman's just like, Toyman's dead, right? He was crushed by Godzilla's foot. I overheard Cheetah and Deathstroke discussing it on my way in. And he's like, here's the dreamstone. I'll handle getting the Titans back home. Wonder Woman's like, wow, Superman, how did you find the dreamstone? He's like, well, as I understand it, Wonder Woman, it's called a plot device. It's a way to wrap up a story with minimal effort. No, that's actually not true. Apparently, Toyman had the dreamstone on him the entire time. So it is a plot device, right? Like he was crushed with the dreamstone in hand and it was just conveniently located by Superman. So it's just a way to end the story in a really minimal, low effort way. It's a plot device, but that's the thing, right? Like, once this is done, it wraps up fairly quickly, right? The dreamstone is used to whisk all the Titans back to the world they came from. Lex Luthor is essentially thrown in prison. Superman takes the dreamstone back to the Fortress of Solitude. Him and Lois Lane sit down and have a picnic. No doubt they're going to be touching naughty bits, probably in the park itself, or they're going to be like those weirdos from that TikTok where they were hiding under the tent or whatever it was. You guys know what I'm talking about? That video was strange. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. This is the end of the story. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. I loved it, and I will catch you all later. Peace.